Good afternoon. My name is Lucy Sandell, and I work with the Career Development Team here at the University of Chicago in beautiful Hyde Park. I'm delighted to welcome you to our webinar entitled Career Blind Spots You Never Knew Existed. The recording will be shared with all registrants in the next few days. Today's speaker is alumna Dr. Jinnie Cristerna. Jinnie is a nationally renowned mental health expert and founder of International High Achievers. She works with high-achieving professionals all over the world to help them clear the blocks that keep them stuck in unhealthy and unproductive places so that they can achieve their full potential. Her ability to speak and work with clients in deeply profound, practical, and inclusive ways has drawn people from various backgrounds and with varying histories. Jinnie has worked with Olympians, professional, and amateur athletes. Her deep understanding of their needs comes authentically, as she is a gold, silver, and bronze medalist in international and national Taekwondo Olympic sparring. Jinnie is also a mental health consultant for local and international news outlets. It is my pleasure to hand over the controls to Jinnie.
Thank you so much, Lucy, and hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Cristerna, and I am super excited to be with my fellow alumnus and alumni here at the University of Chicago, as well as our friends and our families. It is truly an honor and a privilege to share what I have learned with you all and make them very, very practical so you can use them to help yourselves achieve the things that you know you would like to achieve in your life and for your families and communities and your workplaces. So with that being said, as Lucy said, please type any questions in the boxes. And before we get started, to all of our attendees today and those who will be listening later, I did want to just share with you that there is an amazing mentoring program called Wiser, and those of you who want to connect with graduate or college students, Lucy's going to send out a link about that later so you can learn more. Really, really exciting program from one of our alumni who graduated from the college and from Booth. So I just thought it might be something that you would be interested in, especially if you're looking to give back to the university and continue to support in new and creative ways. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. And we're going to talk about minding your career. Now, a lot of people who come and talk with me, they're usually at the precipice of some crises, or they're full-blown in the midst of a crisis. So we're going to talk about those career blind spots that you may not have known existed, or you may have had an inkling that they were kind of lurking around, but it caught you off guard and maybe knocked you off your pins. The goal today is to not get knocked off your pins, and if you do, no big deal, sky didn't fall. You'll be able to recover a lot more gracefully and with a lot more ease than before. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to share a little bit about who I am with you so you can be what I call an educated consumer of information and data. I love it. Because data is what drives the world. And I'm going to take a sip of water. You might hear me doing that throughout the presentation today. I'm Dr. Jinnie Cristerna. I'm a psychotherapist here in Chicago. I'm also a consultant and a coach internationally. So I do work with people all around the world. They can either call in, or most of them do fly in from time to time to do their one-on-one or their personal or in-depth work with me. And I've been doing this for over a quarter century, I think I might be going on 28 years. I just stopped counting after 25. But I founded International High Achievers. I am a graduate of the School of Social Service Administration from way back last century, at the end of the century. I'm also a doctor of Rohan, which is a kind of the deepest form of psychoanalytic study, psychotherapy. And I got my graduate degree there from Delphi University of Spiritual Studies. And I've also been on the Alumni Board of Governors, which is affectionately known as now the Alumni Association, for about 5 years. I have consulted with and continue to consult with news and media outlets all over the world. And I was an athlete, and I fought competitively, and was also the sports psychology consultant for USA Taekwondo, which is the governing board for Olympic Taekwondo. So there you go. Those are my credentials. For those of you who are checking off the boxes, I hope that meets your criteria. and we're going to move on, okay? So let's start with the 5 types of career ick. And what I want everyone to understand is that ick is not pretty. It's not nice. It's not anything that's genteel. It's actually what we call your shadow. And this is the thing that keeps you separated from or cuts you off from the things that you actually are trying to create or realize in your life. So what we're going to talk about today isn't about getting rid of what that ick is. It's now about transforming it and gathering the gold, because that's really what is underneath the ick. And what excuse me, what happens is with my clients and my patients when they come in, is they come in presenting symptoms, right? Whatever that may be for them. But once they kind of work through the ick, which is what I call symptomology, there's a ton of gold there that they can use to create anything that they want. The ick is just really the barrier to that. We are starting to now talk about, if you're a Jungian, alchemy, transforming these things that are very unflattering about our personalities into something that's extremely beautiful and valuable, not just to our employers, but to us as individuals. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. So again, I meant to say this earlier, so I apologize. But definitely grab a paper and a pen if you can, just so you can take down notes if need be. Okay. Let's see. Let's go ahead and get started and go forward. There we go. So career blind spots that you never knew existed. There are 5, and you'll be surprised at what they are. The first is fear of failure. The second is fear of abandonment. The third is fear of nothingness. And the fourth is fear of death. The last one is always the most interesting. We're going to talk about all of these and this one in just a bit. It's deception. So these are the 5 career blind spots that most people get trapped in. And if you get trapped in it, it doesn't mean anything other than you're human. It doesn't say anything about how intelligent you are, how good-willed you are, or anything like that. These are just things that everyone has and that you can choose to deal with or not. Completely up to you. So let's talk about the first one, which is the fear of failure. Now, I've broken down the ick into thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And there's a reason for this that I will share with you at the end of the presentation. Right now, I would love for you to just focus on the thoughts, feelings, and the behaviors for each ick. And again, write down anything that really comes to mind for you, because this is all about you. All right, so the fear of failure, some of the thoughts, although not all of them are listed here, and they do overlap with other ones, but generally speaking, the thoughts and fear of failures are, I can't do it, and if I do, I probably won't do it well because it's way too hard. I can't be consistent, so why even try? It's just gonna, backfire on me. And besides, I don't even know if I want to achieve at this level, because then I'm going to get moved to another level. I don't know if I'm going to be able to sustain that new level of success. So I think I'm just going to not even start. And a lot of times this is where we see a lot of professionals and athletes as well. They give up. And then the feelings that they tend to have are those feelings of doubt, feeling unworthy or helpless, and even feeling embarrassed. And they may not know why they're feeling this way because they haven't connected the feeling with the thought. So what ends up happening, the behaviors look something like this. They either withdraw, they don't even try, or if they try and they're actually starting to be successful, they'll sabotage their progress. They'll undermine their own efforts. You will see that inconsistency in outcome, and they use a lot of excuses. And this is something that I want you guys to be mindful of. Excuses are different from reasons. The reason that they're different is excuses actually allows an individual to absolve themselves from personal responsibility, meaning that that they blame something outside of themselves from keeping them from doing something that they want to do. Oh, the train made me late, as opposed to a reason, which is taking personal responsibility, saying, okay, well, I left, 5 minutes after I was supposed to leave, or after I planned to leave. Therefore, I ended up catching, the train and being held up by the train. Okay, so that's an example of that. The other thing that they tend to do when they're afraid that they're going to fail is they overperform. They go above and beyond in ways that are unreasonably high, and they might miss the details in something. They may never feel that something is good enough. Okay, so those are some of the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that come under that fear of failure. So I want you to just take a moment and make note of that and identify, well, is there something in there that resonates with me, that I kind of sense goes on with me from time to time? Because remember, everyone has at least one ick. So while you guys are thinking about it, Miss Luce, can you pull up that poll for our fear of failure ick?
Yes. So fear of failure. Please select one. Do you procrastinate? Think you'll disappoint others? Not pursue your goals? Or something else? Please choose, and we'll give you a couple of seconds, to go. Five, four, three, two, one. Close.
Excellent. So, what were some of our outcomes, Miss Luce? Were we able to get?
Yep.
Okay. Wow, look at that. We procrastinate, and isn't procrastination one of the biggest things that people say they want to work on when we talk about, becoming more effective and efficient with their time? So that's quite interesting. Let's see, we have more than half are procrastinating. 18% are tied between thinking that they're going to disappoint other people or let them down, and some of them don't even pursue their goals, and that's something that we can change right away. And then 11% says there's something else. So you realize that there's something else going on with you, and that is good. Self-awareness is the beginning of self-realization and actualization. So that's a good thing, okay? So let's go ahead and get back to the presentation, and let's go on to our next ick. Remember, we all have one, so let's just take a look at the next one, which is fear of abandonment. And this is actually a fun one because I think everybody has this fear of abandonment somewhere in their conscious mind, is kind of bouncing around like a little ping pong ball. And some of the thoughts that come along with the fear of abandonment is, people will forget about me and what I've done after I've done it because they don't need it anymore, or they might not need me and they're going to leave me behind, or that I always have to prove myself. Or here's a big one: people only like me because of what I can do, what I have, or what I bring to the table. And I can't be who I really am because people won't like me. People don't appreciate who I am, or they're going to judge me for who I am, and they're going to decide I'm kicked out of the group or what have you. So those are just some of the thoughts that abandonment might bring up for folks. And how does this connect with our feeling? Okay, definitely a lot of anxiety and uncertainty, feeling unworthy, even unlovable, lonely, jealous, maybe even resentful. And those are some of the feelings that people might feel at work, and they don't understand, why do I feel unlovable at work? This is just my job. Well, what people don't realize, especially with this particular ick, is that they either recreate their family dynamics or their internal world at the workplace, or they try to recreate a different version of it, and it might not go well. This is why abandonment is kind of a common thing for a lot of folks when they come in to work on their ick. Okay, so trust me, your feelings and your thoughts, even though they may seem unrelated or just they don't belong at work, there's a reason for that. And those are the kind of things that can lead to this kind of icky behavior, which is you might flip-flop on your opinions, you change your mind, being inconsistent. When we talk about herd mentality, you're basically going along with the group. You don't want to ruffle any feathers. You don't want to create waves. And here is the most interesting thing about abandonment. We know that some people might be clingy, right? They want to just hang around all of the time and kind of get your approval, or you want someone else's approval really, really badly to validate you. But the flip side of that is also bullying. You might force people to like you. You might try to guilt them into doing something or thinking about you in a certain way so they don't leave you. Another behavior when it comes to abandonment is unquestioning loyalty. Being able to identify with a particular individual or a particular group or a particular company can be very, very addictive and reassuring for some people. I can't stand by myself. Okay, the thought is, I have to prove myself, so I cannot be separate from you. I have to show that we're together, we're aligned, we're the same, we have the same thoughts and mindset. I am one of you. That means you can't leave me. Okay, so in the workplace, people will maybe look like they're mean, or maybe they're kind of a brown noser or something like that, but those are the kind of ick factors that will push people away from you, and it can be confusing because you're saying, well, I thought that would help my career, but oftentimes it backfires and it hurts your career, or more importantly, it hurts you. The relationships aren't the kind of quality relationships you're looking for, and the respect that you're looking for isn't freely given. Okay? So now let's go on to the next ick, this fear of nothingness. Now this is a really interesting ick and career blind spot, because what ends up happening for most people in this space is they start to do things that are a little more edgy, that are a little more draining, and we'll talk about that in a moment, what that looks and feels like. But the thoughts around that is, basically, I'll be obliterated. When you are afraid that you're nothing, that you are a nobody, that's worse than being bad. You're not memorable regardless of what you do, which is why when someone says to you or to someone else, you're nothing, that just tears away a person's soul. That takes away their essence. And we are afraid of not being anything. We would rather be bad before we are nothing. Okay? The feeling that usually goes along with that is kind of this numbing black hole, this insatiableness, this dread. And what tends to happen is people feel drained around someone who has this type of ick, this type of blind spot. It's almost like, oh my God, I have to get ready to deal with this person because I know they're going to suck the life out of me. And you'll know it too, because if you're carrying this particular ick, you also feel drained, because now you have to mentally and physically and emotionally prepare yourself to do something that is not at all aligned with who you are. This is one of those things where people start to go, something's off, but we just can't put our finger on it. And I'm sure you've come across someone or heard of someone who has that effect on people. It's like, I don't really want to be around this person because it takes my energy away. So that's a huge kind of ick that comes from this fear of nothingness. The behaviors, they become very invisible, so they kind of blend into the background. They don't want to be seen. They don't want to be acknowledged. But at the same time, they are just kind of this welcome mat. They let people do whatever they want. They become the gopher, kind of a yes person. They can also be very, very quiet. They don't want to speak their mind. But here's the flip end of the other end of that. The flip side of that is they can be very materialistic or very braggy, right? Because now they're trying to become something based on what they have externally. So the house, the cars, the money, the travel. This is where you see people identify themselves by what they have. The question that I ask everybody who comes into my office, especially if they are rich and or wealthy, whether you're usually one or the other, but if I took away everything you had today, who would you be? And that's a question that each of us can ask ourselves, because if we are not the same person without these external things defining us, the job title, the money, the blah, 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 who would we be? And if we are not the same person, that's where we need to start digging. Because we need to find out who we are, because that kind of ick will repel people immediately. Okay? So, Luce, I know I missed the last poll for abandonment, but I was kind of in the flow. But let's go into the fear of nothingness. I'm so sorry. I get into these little mindsets. Can we bring up that poll for abandonment, or do we need to go straight to nothingness? How do we want to do this?
We could do either one. I'm happy.
Okay, well, let's do nothingness, and then we'll go back to abandonment after that.
Cool.
How's that? Okay.
Sounds good to me. Here we go, guys. Okay. Do you suck the energy out of others? I don't even like reading that one. Do you try not to get noticed? Do you feel people take advantage of you? Or do you feel something else? Go ahead and start answering the poll. I'll give everybody 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we'll close the poll. And then I'll share it.
So look at that. So a lot of people feel that they have been taken advantage of. Somebody said, a lot of people said that there's something else. And others say they try not to get noticed. Very few feel like they suck the energy out of others. Really, really good. My question to you would be, do you feel like your energy is sucked when you're trying to interact with people? Because remember, that goes both ways, right? Because if you feel like you're drained, maybe you're gearing yourself up to do something or be somebody that you really are not. So this is a really, really good one. So for those of you who feel like people are taking advantage of you, I want you to reflect on that nothingness. Okay? Are you really trying to be present, or are you trying to be invisible? Are you trying to avoid something in particular? Because that can count against you in the work environment. That can be kind of icky. People are like, we can do whatever we want. We know John or Jane will do it. We can just give it to him or her. And then feeling as though people don't respect you. Okay? Having some boundaries. So that's something to think about. So that's very, very powerful. Excellent. Now, Miss Luce, can we go back to the abandonment poll that I just excitedly overlooked in my presentation? Can we do that?
We can indeed. Let's go
All
for
right.
it. Launch. For abandonment, do you change your mind depending on who you're around? Or do you pretend to be someone you're not? Do you often feel out of place or struggle to fit in? Or do you feel something else entirely? Start answering, please. Okay, we'll give you 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I'll close the poll. And I'll share it.
This is a very interesting one. And this is actually aligned with what people share when they come into the office and they have this particular kind of fear or this particular kind of ick. A lot of people really struggle to fit in where they are, especially in the workplace. But even more so, they'll notice that there has been some of that that goes on within their families. So it's not unusual for them to struggle with that in the workplace. And that's something that I think most people will appreciate looking at, especially if they're trying to advance their career or really trying to enjoy the career that they've chosen. So one of the things I will give you guys a tip, since this is such an overwhelming response, is when you're struggling to try to fit in, or if you feel out of place, use that experience, use that moment as an opportunity to go, what's being reflected back to me? Because you always belong wherever you are. Those are all learning moments. What can you learn in that particular moment about who you are? And then this will make sense in the webinar just a little later, because we're going to talk about how you take that and turn it into gold. And I promise you it works every time if people follow the way that I give it. Not everyone does, which is okay too. Everyone has a different way of learning and doing and being. So, but that's a great poll, and that completely is aligned with what people struggle with when they come in to see me. So thank you, Miss Luce. That was awesome. So now as we go back and we start to pick up on the next ick, this one I will say, fear of death, it's not the physical death that we're talking about. Okay? We're talking about the fear of being dead as an identity. Okay, so we're not talking about a physical death, although sometimes that's what people really are afraid of. But for a career blind spot, this is going to look very different in the workplace. So the thoughts that you might have, I don't want to get laid off, I don't want to get fired, I don't want to go away, at least not on their terms. If I leave a workplace or an employer, I want to do it on my terms. I want to do it because it's my choice, right? So that's one thought that people have. Others are, you know, I have a lot to accomplish and I don't have a lot of time. This is often connected to that fear of abandonment that we were talking about before. But when people are really hurried and pressed to complete something, right, there's this feeling that there's not enough time for me to do it and I won't get it done. So when we talk about fear of death, we really talk about fear of missing the mark. We are foreclosed on the things that we're trying to achieve in our lifetime or at this workplace. So the feelings that we have usually tend to be some type of insecurity or anxiety, a hurriedness that we have while we're under pressure. Maybe we don't feel good enough or not wanted, so we can only achieve this goal if we have a team that we're working with, and maybe the team does not want us, so there's that fear of abandonment. We don't know why that we can't work with this team, or what is it about us that makes them not want to work with us. There's a sense of impatience, or maybe you just don't trust the people that you're with, which in and of itself can be this huge ick and repelling, and can kind of get you pushed off of a team, especially if you don't trust them. Now, the behaviors are really interesting because you can be very pushy or rude, maybe even bossy. There's a closed system type of thinking where only a select group of people will hold the information or the key to execution of a particular strategy or what have you. Another is you might constantly ask for that assurance or validation, and you can be overly accommodating. So it could be any one of those behaviors from one extreme to another when we are afraid that we won't be able to complete something that we started at our workplace or within our industry. So for those of you who may be self-employed, this is something to be mindful of, because when people feel that from you, they immediately run because that may not be the case for them. So regulating that is going to be really, really important and key here. So Miss Luce, can we pull up the poll for this particular ick or blind spot?
Absolutely. Do you say yes to or go along with everything? Do you tend to be rude or demeaning under pressure? Do you feel you're running out of time to achieve your life goal? Or do you feel something else? Okay, so I'll give you 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we'll close the poll, and I'll share it.
Wow, now this is a really good one. Again, this is really aligned with what most people come in for, and they feel like they're running out of time. And that is one of the biggest indicators that you have this blind spot. And so chances are you're probably engaging in one of those behaviors that was on that slide. Okay, so this is something that I really do encourage people to take a look at, because if you feel like you are running out of time, my guess is that you probably are going to be a little bossy, rude, pushy, okay? Or you're going to be overly accommodating because you feel like you can't do it by yourself. One of those behaviors is probably going to stick out in your mind right now as being a prominent behavior. This is what I'm going to lovingly suggest. Don't try to excuse it. Just allow it to be what it is and let that settle in so you can understand it in a more objective and compassionate way later. Don't try to excuse it and go, but. Okay? That's really going to undermine you. That'll fall into that self-sabotage and that fear of failure that we talked about in that first slide. Okay? I'm going to take another sip of water. And let's go ahead and let's move on to the last blind spot. And I want us to take a little more time with this one because there is a lot that goes into this one. This blind spot is called deception, or as we like to call it in psychology speak, dissonance. Now, this, what we call a tank, if you do Rohan, this tank is extremely powerful, and it's the hardest one. It's usually the most painful and challenging blind spot or ick to identify and for people to own. A lot of people, they can see it in other people, and most people can see it within us. But we, as an individual, can't see it within ourselves. And when someone points it out to us, it can feel very forced on us and very foreign. It's almost like, I can't see myself doing that. Now, this blind spot or this ick covers up what the real fear is. And there's usually more than one. Although not always, but it's usually more than one of the first 4 slides that we talked about. What tends to happen in dissonance is that if someone says, if you have a belief, for example, that all men are strong, okay, let's just use that, and you have an experience and you come across a guy who is not as strong as you are physically, you might go, oh my goodness, well, they just don't work out, but if they worked out, they would be stronger than me. Okay. That's an example, kind of an elementary example of a dissonance. What you see doesn't match up with what you believe, so you might make an excuse for it, you may overlook it, you may rationalize it in some other way. And that applies to every area of our life. Whether it's politics, whether it's religion, whether it's with our families, we have a belief system about how the world works, about who we are in the world. And beliefs are very, very strong. They're very ingrained and tied to our identity. So when we feel our belief is being challenged, we're actually afraid that who we are is being challenged. And if we change our beliefs, then that means we are no good. We are wrong. Something about us will die. And that's just not the case. Belief systems are very powerful and can be very dangerous, especially if we're unwilling or unable, for whatever reason, to look at them and say, I wonder if that belief is valid anymore. It's really hard to shift a personal paradigm because that's all we know. It leaves us feeling vulnerable. It leaves us feeling weak. And that's not something that most people are able to tolerate or willing to tolerate. So they make excuses for what they think, for what they feel, and what they do. Ideally, it's about taking this blind spot and turning this dissonance into some type of consonance in a positive way, because we can have consonance in negative ways as well. But we really want to evolve our belief systems about who we are and how the world operates so we can actually be more comfortable in the world. We can achieve or realize our goals in this world. And I'll give you a perfect example. The more diversified the world becomes, the more diverse America becomes, a lot of beliefs are going to be challenged, as they are now. And you can see this within other people and even within ourselves when we rise up to defend something that's contradictory to what we think we know to be true. This is the biggest blind spot that most people in this world have. They want their beliefs to apply to everybody. And if everybody has a different set of beliefs and they're trying to apply it to everybody else, it's not going to go over so well, right? That's when we get a lot of conflict. But everybody's belief can't be true for everybody, can it? This is why I saved this one for last. Because one of the first four is hidden under deception. Because no one can know the truth, not even me. I can't stand to know that this no longer applies. It may have applied and been applicable when I was 5, when I was 12, when I was 21, but it may no longer be applicable today. And what am I going to do? Who am I if I don't believe this anymore? So that's really the main thought. This cannot be true. It can't be. And there is a fierceness in defending your truth, despite what you see reflected back to you in the world, despite facts. The feelings that often come with this career blind spot, this ick, is confusion. There's a lot of shame, anxiety. There's a lot of guilt and defensiveness. An enormous amount of fear of what would happen if this continues to go on and people don't come to their senses. There's a fear in things changing. There's a deep sense of anger or rage and jealousy or some type of mania or fanaticism. There's something very, very profoundly powerful in defending something that you believe to be true, and that type of power can either be passion or fanatical. But here is where it becomes a blind spot. If you're defending something to be true in the face of fact, you will become an outlier. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to go along with the flow. This is where discernment comes in. You don't just go along to get along, because sometimes what everyone else is doing is inaccurate, but you have to be able to suspend your belief and entertain the thoughts and the beliefs of others. That observing ego, that ability to truly hold multiple positions and points of view and selecting from that what matches up with reality is a skill, is a habit that is only born of self-realization without judgment, meaning compassion, meaning you evolve and you grow. And in the workplace, isn't it all about change? Isn't it all about adaptation? Not to what's right or wrong, but to what's real. And you shaping what's real and balancing that against what your moral compass says without imposing it on others the same way you would not want them to impose it on you. And you see this happen a lot in the workplace. You see this happen a lot in our world. But remember, what you see in the world is simply a reflection of you, of your internal world. So what does that look like in terms of behavior? Ta-da! Look at this. You get closed systems, you get cover-ups, you get excuses, you get rudeness and blame, all of that projection. It's all this person's fault. It's all out here. Nothing is happening inside of me. It's everything out here that's causing the issue. There's exceptions to the rule. In this place, in this place of dissonance or deception, you're not even saying there's an excuse or a reason. You're just saying, this doesn't apply to me. It applies to everyone else but me. The special privileges that we like. That's why we like to be a part of the group. If you think about the University of Chicago or any other university in this country or on this planet, people associate with being an alumni or an alumna of that university because there's an identification with. But one of the things that I love about U of C is that there's enough room to dissent and to challenge it. We are ever evolving. That's where you also now see in this deception the inconsistency, that herd mentality. We all have to think alike. Being bullies and materialistic and bragging about all of the things we've conquered and accomplished and who we've conquered and who we've beaten down in an effort to accomplish our goal. Unquestioned loyalty, personal attacks, distractions all over the place. This is what this blind spot can look like. And this is the most dangerous and painful blind spot or career ick to have, because you're so all over the place you don't even know where to start. This is always the toughest one for people to own. Can we bring up that poll for this one, Luz?
Yes, absolutely. Do you feel people are always criticizing you? Do you think you're better than your peers? Do you start your answers with "I know" or use "but" often in your replies, or something else? Oh, I love seeing people jump on and start responding.
This is a good thing. Self-awareness is
it is.
privilege,
It
I
means
promise you.
that people are engaged. I love it. Okay, so let's give 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 a close, and then I'll share results.
Wow. So here's the thing that I find interesting about this one. Generally speaking, there is not a lot of people who can even reply to this, which is why we see something else. Because it's not one thing in particular. So it's not like it's 1 or 2 behaviors or 3 that we put up here on this poll. Deception and dissonance, remember, No one can know, not even me. But if you know that it's one of these four, even if you know that it's something else, that's a start. Because we all have this. We all have dissonance. So for those of you, the 21% that says you feel like people are always criticizing you, brava. Brava. For those of you, that 19% that says you think you're better than your peers, brava to you as well. For those of you who start your answers with I know or use but when you're replying to someone, brava to you. And I'm going to tell you why. Because at least you know it's that particular behavior that you do. Now you have something to start with. For those of you, the 31% that it's something else, write down what that something else is. Because now you can go back to one of those other 4 slides and figure it out. You're not in denial. That's the beauty of deception, that once you have the courage to face yourself, you can make those changes that will ripple out into your workplace, that will ripple out into your families and communities, into the world. You will be able to actualize your personal legacy, whatever that is for you. But you cannot lie to yourself. You can lie to everyone else on this planet as long as you tell yourself the truth. That's the rule. Because that's where you can start to make a difference. That's when you can start to take back your power and change your trajectory. It is no longer a blind spot. So now let's get on to identifying at least one of the ick factors. Now everyone, again, remember, has one icky thing that they do, at least. I have like 5,327,000 of them. But everyone has at least one icky thing that they do. Here's the key. Separate your ick from who you are. Separate your blind spot from who you are. It does not define you, and it can be transformed unless you choose to keep it. It does not define you. You are not the same person today that you were yesterday, 2 years ago, 10 years ago. You aren't. You can't be. It's against quantum physics. You can't, you grow unless you choose to stay where you are. Your thoughts define where you go and who you are. You can change those. Your feelings, you can evolve those. You can heal those. The behaviors that you have as a result of that. That's the validation that you have grown, that you are self-aware, that you are evolved, that you have matured. That's why companies pay a lot of money for people who fail often, because they've learned something from it. If you do everything correctly, what is there for us to teach you? What can you learn? Nothing. You're perfect. Do it yourself then, right? So your first ick. So this is where I want you to get your pen and paper, and I encourage you all to try to keep a journal. Now, remember, this is alchemy at its best, so we're going to definitely focus on taking our shadows, transmuting it, meaning shedding some light on it, bringing awareness to it. That will drastically alter the way you exist in the world, and it will shift your relationships, especially at work. So here we go. First thing you do, you either pick the strongest negative feeling or strongest negative thought. You're going to write it down. The strongest one you can think of. Okay, it might be, I'm a failure, I'm a loser, whatever. Write it down. Or if it's a feeling, I feel worthless, or I feel useless, or I feel lost. Write that down. Okay, the second one is now you're going to identify the corresponding negative thought or feeling, and you're going to write that down. So if you said, my thought is I'm a loser, so now let's look at the feeling. I feel lonely. Okay. All right, so you're going to do the corresponding depending on what you chose first. The third thing, you're going to go back to the most recent time you had that thought or feeling. Right? Oh, sorry. So that's what you're going to do. You're going to identify your most recent thought or feeling. That's your first ick. And what you're going to do is you're going to identify, well, what's my ick? That'll be easy to do at that point, right? Here's my thought. Here's my feeling. the most recent time I felt that, this is what happened. Okay, so my career blind spot is I'm afraid that I'm going to fail or that I'm going to get fired or that I'm not going to be able to achieve my goals or that I'm going to not be valued or people are going to forget about all the great things I did for the company or I've been telling myself this huge lie. I've been defending something that's no longer true and people don't like that. I don't even like it. Okay? Now, how do you take that ick that's been, or that blind spot that's been holding you back, cutting you off, and turn that into something that really propels you forward, right? It's about bringing our shadow into consciousness. See, when we start to look at those things, those blind spots become gentler, they become pliable, and it's easier to integrate them and process them. And that's something Jungian psychoanalyst Robert A. Johnson talks about very, very well in all of his books. I suggest you read them if you can. Very, very good stuff. So remember, your ick is your shadow, and your shadow holds all of that unclaimed gold. Okay? So, becoming top pick. Same thing. Keep a journal, get your pen and your paper, write it down. What behavior would you like to have instead? Now that you've identified your ick and the behavior, thought, and feeling that goes with it, what behavior would you like to have instead? We're going to go backwards if you haven't figured that out by now. 2, you're going to write what you would like to feel when you're engaging in that behavior. So if I say I would like to be a lot more pleasant, so I would like to feel content. Maybe not so happy, but content. And then what thought would you like to have guiding you when you're doing this behavior? And I would like to think, we can figure this out. This isn't the end of the world. We can figure this out. So, that will guide you. So write that down. And then start doing that for 30 days. That's how long it takes for something to become a habit, to feel natural, but you have to be committed to that. If you're not committed to that, it's going to be super, super hard, and it's going to feel like a diet where you're going up and down and up and down, and you're going to feel like it just doesn't work for you. You're the one that has to do the work. You're the hardest working person on this webinar today. Okay? So, with that said, I think I made decent time, Miss Luce. If you want to learn more and do more, you can definitely visit my website. There's blogs there. There's some self-help books there if you want to, and just some ideas on what you can do to help yourself transform your blind spots or your ick a lot more quickly and gracefully. You can do it on your own, which I tell people, try it and see how it works for you. And if you get stuck, then you find somebody who can help you through it. But I don't want my UFC family and our friends and our alumni to struggle when they don't have to. Right? We want it to be efficient. We want it to be a process that allows you to make good use of your time and your talent. I want to see all of you guys do well. I know a lot of you. You're super smart. I want you to be able to shine like the beacon that you are. So thank you so very much with love and light. I wish you all pleasant journeys. I'm happy to take questions if there are any, Miss Luce. So I will hand it back to you.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, there are questions. There have been a couple of questions about the slides. I know I always send a recording, but may I share your slides as well separately?
Absolutely. Hey, I'm going to tell you something. If I am sharing it with you, you can have it and make it your own. Okay? I want you to do that. So absolutely, Miss Luce, share away.
Great. Thank you. There's some people that said that when they chose something else, they thought that the reason they chose it is because that particular ick didn't apply to them. So.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's, out of a gazillion, I pick like the top 3. So something else, as long as you know it's something else, you know it. So you're ahead of the game, and you just write that thing down and start working on it.
Great. And somebody asked about reaching out to you. Well, we've got your email address and your phone number. Also, where do you see your patients in general?
I'm in Chicago, right down the street, not too far, not down the street, but not too far from the campus. I'm across from the Board of Trade. But clients, I work with them, they phone in and we do a lot of work that way. We do the coaching work that way. And when they're coming through Chicago, they'll, happen to have a layover where they can come in and do their work. Or, they live here in Chicago, but it's either virtually or in person. So it's very flexible.
Great. Uh, Someone asked, what is Rohan psychoanalysis?
Rohan, it's the highest form of therapy that you can do. It's very, very quick. It has 13 processes where you're going into your unconscious mind and you're pulling out all of your blind spots or your ick or your shadow if you're Jungian. I love psychoanalysis. My first real therapist, I don't want to say real, but my first therapy that I took seriously, he was a psychoanalyst. He was amazing. And I just like Rohan because it's more efficient and it's a lot deeper. There is not the countertransference or the transference that goes on in a lot of clinical modalities. It's a psychospiritual modality for sure. So, but it's very, very powerful, and it's for people who are looking for maximization of their time. Now, it doesn't mean that they don't still do weekly sessions or, every other week or anything like that. It just means that they access the gold and then they can process remotely. So that's what a lot of people who come in to Chicago to work on, they usually choose Rohan. Not everyone can do Rohan. It's a very high level process and you have to have a pretty stable ego and strong and observing ego. So there's usually a lot of prep work that goes before people do Rohan, but it's a very powerful process. Everything that I offer, I've done myself, and Rohan is amazing. Definitely worth it if you can do it.
Great. Thanks. I like this. A lot of issues this person feels at work can be summed up as, I'm not capable. I feel like I'm always wanting and needing more training to be good at what I do. What if factor would you place that under?
That would be fear of failure. Because you know, sweet soul, you know what it is. You can do it. But here's the thing, this is why people love, when they work with me, they love the processes. Either Yandi, which is #1 in people's book because they come in for 3 days and they're good. And they go back with a lot of awareness and then they just do calls with me every other week. And what happens is when you start to get addicted to going inside and figuring it out, you go deeper down the rabbit hole. There are some things in life that are not meant for you to know right now. And you digging and digging and digging is a way of avoiding making it practical in the world. And that's my big thing with my clients. We're not going to just have you in my office. They know they're not going to be with me forever. My job for each of my clients is they very seldom come into my office. Real therapy happens in the world. How did you apply what you became aware of? How has that changed your life? So, sweet soul, I would just say to you, it's not about digging deeper and understanding. Now it's about applying and learning. You can do it. You can do this. That's the illusion, is that you can't. That's why it's a blind spot. It's a lie. That's all blind spots are. You can do this. Absolutely you can do this, but that would be under the fear of failure, sweet soul.
Great. I know there are more questions, and I wish we could accommodate people.
Oh.
But GoToWebinar, there is a problem when we run over with the recordings. So I will have to say thank you so much, Jinnie. Thank you. There's more than 100 people that stayed on right through the end, and that is astonishing. So if you want to contact me or contact Jinnie about your further questions, if you contact me, I'll pass them along to Jinnie, or you can reach out to her directly. But thank you all. Thank you, Jinnie. You were amazing. I knew you were going to be.
Thank you, sweet soul. Oh, I love my UFC family. I do anything for you guys. I just love you all to pieces.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I'm getting people saying thank you. Definitely reaching out. Awesome webinar. You're amazing. Okay. So thanks, everybody. Thanks, Ginny. I'm
Thank
going to
you.
turn us off now. Bye,
Okay,
everybody.
bye.